I'm very honored to tell you that we've solved 7 wars, wars that were unsolvable, wars that couldn't be negotiated or done. The U.S. has done 7 of them. The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let me down. He's really let me down. It was going to be Russia and Ukraine, but we'll see how that turns out. But that turned out to be, I thought it might be among the easiest of the group, but we had settled just about every conflict, and as you know, we're working very hard on Israel and Gaza. All that's happening over there. Complex, but it's going to get done. It'll all get done right, and likewise Russia and Ukraine will get done. But you never know in war. You know, war is a different thing. Things happen that are very opposite of what you thought. You thought you were going to have an easy time or a hard time, and it turns out to be the reverse. As we saw in the unforgettable parade yesterday at Windsor Castle, what a place it is. The British Armed Forces carry on one of the finest military traditions in the world, one of the greatest marching bands, one of the most magnificent sights I've seen. I know that our service members look forward, and we do look so forward, to working even more closely with yours as you push toward that 5% goal. And I think, Mr. Prime Minister, you're just about there. You're going to be there very quickly, along with a lot of other great countries. I want to thank NATO and our wonderful head of NATO, who's really worked very hard, Mark, for the job they've done. As you know, NATO is at 2% GDP, and they didn't pay it. Now they're at 5%, then they pay it. And we appreciate that. And we're sending a lot of weapons to NATO. NATO's paying for those weapons in full. But we're sending them, and we're doing a great job at getting them what they need. And we appreciate the fact that they're taking care of it, because the United States is into that war for $350 billion. And just really very sad. It just got out of control. They didn't know what they were doing. But over the generations, British and American warriors have shed their blood side by side in defense of liberty and freedom. And that's why it's so imperative that the United States and the United Kingdom stand together for these fundamental rights and values of the English-speaking world. And we've always stood together, and we will continue to.
We're also working together to end the killing in Ukraine. In recent days, Putin has shown his true face, mounting the biggest attacks since the invasion began, with yet more bloodshed, yet more innocents killed, and unprecedented violations of NATO airspace. These are not the actions of someone who wants peace. So we've discussed today how we can build our defences further, support Ukraine, and decisively increase the pressure on Putin to get him to agree a peace deal that will last. And President Trump, you have led the way here, and we will continue to stand and work together for security and for peace. On the question of the pressure on Putin and on Russia, which is obviously really important, look, I think it is a challenge to Europe. There are a number of European countries which are too reliant on energy from Russia. The UK actually obviously has almost got nothing at all, but we do need to bear down and work with our European counterparts here. There are 1 or 2 countries, I think, that do need to look again at the question of energy. There's no one silver bullet here. We do have to have a wider suite of sanctions, which we've put in place a number of times, working across Europe and with the United States. And of course, we must, and we are, making sure that Ukraine is in the strongest position now, because one of my long concerns here has been that whilst we talk about a ceasefire, and we all want a ceasefire, and we talk about what might happen after a ceasefire, we mustn't forget that Ukraine needs our support now. We've said we stand with Ukraine from the start to the finish, and that means we must continue to supply them with what they need in order to fight this war, which of course resulted from and is a result of Russian aggression. We have particularly done the sort of leadership role in the coalition of the willing, so that if there is a ceasefire and if there is a deal, and I do hope there is, that is then lasting and not then broken, because given previous history, I don't trust Putin.
The Russia situation, I hope we're going to have some good news for you coming up. But again, it doesn't affect the United States. And look, it doesn't so much affect you. Of course, you are a lot closer to the scene than we are. We have a whole ocean separating us. But I will say this, it's millions of people have died in that war, millions of souls. And they're not American, they're soldiers, mostly soldiers, as you know. The soldiers are being killed at levels that nobody's seen since the Second World War. But they're being killed. And I feel I have an obligation to get it settled for that reason. Thank you.
And just to add on that question, because we have to put extra pressure on Putin. And it's only when the president has put pressure on Putin that he's actually shown any inclination to move. So we have to ramp that pressure up. I think it's important to have this conversation in the context of what's happened in recent weeks. We saw damage and bombing to the British Council in Keir. These are targets that it was thought until recently were not targets that would be hit. The British Council, the European Union Embassy, the Council of Ministers, where President Zelensky's ministers work was hit. Again, these were thought to be places that wouldn't be hit. And then the incursion into Poland last week. And if you put that together, what you can see is either an emboldenment or at least an increased recklessness on Putin's part. And that's why I said earlier that they're not the actions of someone who wants peace. So we have to ramp up. And we discussed earlier today, we have built the coalition of the willing with British leadership and French leadership, stepping up with military planning in the seas, in the sky, on the ground, and ramping up what we do with the Ukrainians themselves. And of course, that taken with an American guarantee is now an example, I think, of the challenge of Europe stepping up to the plate, which it has done in the last few months, to show through what we and the French have done that we're prepared to take the lead in this and take the necessary measures.
But that's a war that could have been a third world war, and I don't think we're going to be there now. But that was heading to a third world war, and what a shame it is. What a shame it is.